If you're experiencing a dynamic in which no matter what you say or do, it's always wrong, welcome. You're in the right place. You can't make another person more reasonable, but you can protect your peace and your home environment. Unfortunately, when conflict is chronic, the goal may not be peace, love, and understanding. It may simply be stability. I'm Deanna, and here on the Not So Wicked Stepmother, I love helping blended families thrive. And my goal is usually to create the most harmonious environment we can for our kids. But I understand some situations are more complicated. So today we're going to discuss high conflict dynamics in blended families. High conflict isn't occasional disagreements. It's a pattern. Everything escalates. Goalposts move. You find yourself constantly over-explaining or trying to defend your point of view, and like nothing you ever say is right. If you are writing paragraphs or laying in bed at night replaying conversations trying to figure out what went wrong, you may be in the loop. Step-parents can easily feel pulled into this kind of dynamic, especially if it already exists between the co-parents, but I also want to acknowledge that this can occur within any of the relationships. So it's not about placing blame on anybody in the family, it's about naming what you're experiencing and figuring out how you can redirect it. It's much easier to label someone toxic or high conflict than it is to accept, I can't change the way this person sees me or treats me, but I have some control over how I participate and how I show up. And even though it may feel very personal, it probably isn't. If somebody's treating you that way, the chances are very high that is how they're living their life, and you don't have to get pulled into that. I'm breaking this down into 4 pillars for managing high conflict. And pillar number 1 is don't fuel the fire. High conflict feeds on emotional fuel. So remove the fuel. Wherever possible, keep your responses brief and logistics related. You don't have to explain your motives or defend your character or go into long explanations about anything. And here, a little empathy goes a long way. Take a breath and try to see things from their point of view, even if they're coming at you and even if you disagree. That will help you to meet them where they are and possibly diffuse the situation. I don't mean trying to placate them and smooth things over or accept being treated in a disrespectful way. I simply mean when you can take that moment to see the other person as a human being who's doing their best, you stop reacting to them and it gives you a moment to decide how you want to engage. Remember, you have no control over someone else's behavior, but you do have some control over your own. You can choose how you show up. You can go into a situation knowing conversations like these have tended to escalate. Emotions run high. I feel like I either have to explain myself or defend myself or try to make them feel better or argue with them, and I don't want to do any of those things. So I'm going to go in knowing I'm not taking things personally and I'm just going to focus on logistics and facts. When you stay focused on the logical, however, there is another trap here. You can't reason with unreasonable. If another person is spinning or they're just upset or they're in a pattern where they are trying to pull you into the drama of it all, trying to logic your way through it also is not going to work. And you can notice that without judging them. We have all been in situations where we were spinning out. Just think about the last time you were hangry. We see it a lot with kids. If they are having a meltdown and they're just having a really difficult time, it's not the moment to try to reason with them or talk to them in a logical way. Many of us have heard the phrase, they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. And that can be true with adults too. And so again, if you're in a high conflict situation, it may feel easier to just judge that person and think, well, they are high conflict. They are always causing drama. They're always giving me a hard time. But if you can just step back and go, you know what, they're having a hard time. And I can have compassion for that and I can choose not to engage in it and draw a healthy boundary. And in my experience, that boundary usually doesn't need to be announced. You can just know for yourself, when this is happening, when a conversation is starting to spin out this way, I'm just going to remove myself from the situation and gracefully exit. The boundaries that you choose for your own life are totally personal and totally up to you, but I do think a lot of times choosing not to do any kind of emotional stuff via text is a good idea. Text can be so easy to misunderstand and for people to just get in these loops of writing paragraphs and not even read what's being said back to them, just trying to prove their point over and over. So texting I think really often is better for logistics, for kind of making sure everyone's on the same page. And if there are conversations that maybe have a little bit more emotion involved, those are probably better had on the phone. And I'm saying that as someone who definitely has fallen into that trap before and has gotten into texts that didn't really go anywhere. And so I've learned from experience that just doesn't tend to work very well. What I do think can be helpful sometimes, if you really feel like, oh my gosh, I'm being so deeply misunderstood and they are like questioning my character and they are accusing me of all these things that don't feel true to me, you can write all that out, and that might feel really therapeutic. That might feel really good. I have done this. It doesn't usually need to be sent. Usually that is a good exercise for you to just kind of get it all out and get how you feel, and then you don't have to censor yourself and you can say whatever you want to say, knowing that that is just for you to get it out. If you have experienced that with anyone in your life, where somebody is saying something to you about you that doesn't feel true to you, and you might feel really deeply hurt and like you just really want them to understand your intention, or you want to explain the situation or be heard or be understood, sometimes this is really helpful for me to think about. Somebody shared this with me years ago, and if somebody is saying something about you and you're like, that isn't true, just know it isn't true. Just take a breath and lean into that knowing, like they're saying something that just isn't true. And along with that, the example that was given to me was if they were saying, there are purple and green snakes under my bed and they're trying to eat me, you wouldn't try to explain to them that there are not, in fact, purple and green snakes under the bed trying to eat them. You would just know that isn't true. And I think that that is a really good, just easy visual to think about if you ever find yourself in this kind of situation and you hear something being said to you that you're like, oh my gosh, that's not true. Purple and green snakes. It's just purple and green snakes. It is not your job to convince them that there are no purple and green snakes. You just take care of yourself and move on, which again, I understand is so much easier said than done. So when I'm sharing this, it is from a place of practice. I'm not saying I have this down perfectly and I am a Zen master and I never have conflict with anyone ever. I'm just sharing things that I have learned from being in situations that have been difficult. I feel like sometimes in our effort to validate our experience and name our experience, it can become a little bit of just kind of going down the rabbit hole into feeling a little bit like a victim. And so I want to feel more empowered. I want you to feel more empowered, especially if you are in a dynamic that feels high conflict and you're in a blended family. It's not something you can just walk away from. It's not like having a job or a friendship that isn't feeling healthy to you. This is family, and you may have to figure out a way through it. If you're a step and there's a high conflict dynamic, sure, you can acknowledge, wow, I didn't know what I was getting into here. But you can also look for tools to help give yourself the best experience you can possibly have. And for those of you who are co-parenting, I'm sure you also didn't think you were signing up for co-parenting from separate households when you had a kid together. So whether you are divorced or whether you are just raising a kid together, no one really planned it this way. We're all doing the best we can, and we're all trying to navigate this kind of uncomfortable family dynamic. Moving on to pillar number 2, which is set quiet boundaries. And I touched on this a little bit already because it is directly related to not feeding the emotional fire, but I do feel like it's a separate thing because it's a lot easier to do this when you are already from a place of having decided not to take things personally, deciding to keep your focus on the logic, which you're doing in pillar number 1. But when it comes to pillar number 2, to set quiet boundaries, the operative word here is quiet. It can be really condescending if you are keeping your cool and then you are telling them, I'm not going to accept being spoken to this way. And that can actually provoke a more emotional response. So it is key to just know what your boundaries are and just hold that boundary. If you have ever been told to relax or calm down when you were upset, you already know that that doesn't feel great. So let's not do it to other people. Again, you can notice, wow, this person is being high conflict, I'm having difficult interactions with them without judging them. And so we don't want to make things any harder on you or them than they need to be. And the easiest way to do that is to not engage in that kind of condescending language. Trying to communicate a boundary from a place of calm can come off like you're talking down to somebody, and we don't want anybody to feel that way. And this is true, again, also with kids. So with kids, it can be a little bit different because we do want to maintain our calm and model our calm, and sometimes we will be setting a boundary from a calm place. But that is very different from a disconnected place or an above you place, right? So if you're getting yourself grounded and you're choosing, I'm not going to get into the weeds of this, I'm going to keep myself regulated, I'm going to breathe, and I'm going to be a little bit in control of my behavior here, you can still meet them with empathy. You can still have compassion, and you can connect with them in a way that doesn't make them feel like you're talking down to them. How this could look with an adult co-parent, let's say, for example, you're on the phone discussing something logistical with the kids, like a pickup. And now they are accusing you of overstepping and trying to replace them, and they're saying things to you that are triggering, and you want to defend yourself or explain yourself or make them feel better, any of those responses that you might be feeling, or fight back. And what you can do is just say, I know we really have to figure this out by Sunday. I've got to go right now, so we'll talk about it later, and just end the call. When you do this, you are bringing it back to the original intention of the phone call. The whole purpose of the phone call was to discuss something logistical. It has gone in a different direction. You are holding your boundary. I'm not going to engage in that, but we do need to solve this other problem. And so you're kind of redirecting it back to them. They might, probably won't, but they might at that point say, okay, let's just figure it out now. And then if they're willing to do that, you can. Otherwise, just get off the phone. And if you are the step parent, that's probably a good time to hand this one back to the other parent, because you do not need to be inserting yourself into those situations. You don't have to be problem solving. You can just tell your spouse, you know what, I tried to figure this out. I'm going to need you to handle that. And then you can just take that interaction as data. Maybe this is new information for you. Maybe you have just learned that when you try to help handle logistics, it doesn't go well. So you don't need to keep doing that in the future. We all know the definition of insanity, repeating the same action, expecting a different result. So if it's not going well when you do this, there is no reason for you to continue that behavior. If you have ever found yourself saying, every time I do this, this happens, well, that's an opportunity to look at your own behavior. And again, I am saying this from a place of practice. This is something that I have found myself doing. Saying to a friend or saying to my spouse, wow, every time I do this, this is what happens. Well, maybe I should stop doing that then. And to me, this is what's really at the heart of a quiet boundary. It's really more about defining for yourself what you are and are not willing to participate in and how you want to show up. And so you're setting these boundaries for yourself. The next strategy I want to talk about for managing high conflict in a blended family is pillar number 3, which is remember you're all on the same team. Now again, I get it. This can be difficult when there's conflict, when there's disagreements, maybe personalities clashing, maybe history of hurt feelings. But at the end of the day, you guys are all on the same team together, and that team is this family. That team is the kids. And so I've talked about this before, but I really like the idea of thinking of it like your colleagues. It kind of removes the emotion out of it. You might have at your place of work somebody that you don't get along with very well, and you still have to work with them. Sometimes that's a good way to look at co-parenting in a high conflict situation. When you remind yourself we're on the same team, it can really help you to get out of that loop of engaging in more of a hostile way or a defensive way and get back to, why are we even doing this? Why are we even in a relationship with each other at all? Why do we have to do this? Oh, right, it's for the kids. And so when you bring it back to that, it really helps keep it in perspective and remind you what is good about doing this. It may be difficult, but it's worth it. This is the life you've chosen. This is the family you are part of. And your partner is the person you fell in love with and chose to build this life with. And so when you remind yourself that all of these people in the family are your teammates, but you have a different relationship with each of them. And so with your partner, when things get tough, when maybe there's high conflict with other members of the family, that's the person that you can turn to. That's the person that you guys can work together on solving those problems, that you can find the levity where you need to, and that's the person you can always go to. And then when you're dealing with the kids and with their other parent, those relationships might look a little bit different, but they are also part of the team. Remembering you're all on the same team can help bring the temperature down when things get heated. And again, that doesn't mean being on the same team doesn't mean that you have all the same ideas. It doesn't mean that you share the same strategies. So you can be on the same team, and be really different from each other. You can have different ideas about how to live your lives and what kind of values you have. That is all okay. You're still on the same team. And again, especially within the parental relationships here, when we're looking at the adult relationships, part of your job as a team is raising these kids. And so that is a priority that you have to keep focused on. You having this perspective that you're all on the same team does not guarantee that you will be a welcome member of the team. There might be somebody who doesn't acknowledge that you are even part of the team at all, but you are still part of the team. And again, as step parents, we can stay in our lane. We can know, like, I don't need to replace anybody. I don't need to try to be a job that I'm not or a role that I'm not in this family. I can show up and do my very best, and it matters. It matters and it's valuable. This part can be hard to accept, but you matter even if you're not being acknowledged. Even if the kids you're helping raise don't seem to appreciate you or notice what you're doing for them, even if their other parent is actively sabotaging your relationship with them or disrupting it, you still matter. You still are part of the team, whether anybody's acknowledging it or not. It may not feel great to feel like a silent partner in your family, but even if the other relationships are tense, you should be feeling seen and valued by your partner. And if you're not, it's okay to talk to them about that. It's okay to let them know that you really need to feel valued, that you love them and you want to be part of this family, and some of these other relationships are challenging, and so you need to feel really seen and valued by them. In the context of this whole family as a team, you and your partner are the foundation of this household. And so being aligned together is so important and so worth investing in. Investing your time together, making sure you're on the same page, communicating your feelings. You don't need to hide how you're feeling about some of these other relationships from your partner. You don't need to protect them from that. I think sometimes step parents feel like, maybe some shame around that. Like, I don't want them to know that I'm having a hard time with the kids, or that their ex stresses me out. It may not be the easiest conversation to have, especially if this is not something the two of you have talked about before, but it's really worth it. It's worth it to open up to your spouse about what is challenging about being a step parent. They don't necessarily have any idea what you're experiencing or what you're feeling unless you share it with them. And so when you do, then they can support you and they can be there for you, and the two of you can figure out how to navigate some of the situations that may be especially difficult for you. When it comes to the other relationships in your family, just try to remember it's not necessarily personal or permanent. And I've talked about this before, but when you come in as a step, you may experience things that have much less to do with you personally than what you represent. So for the kids, you represent change in their lives and the fact that their parents are no longer living in the same house. And that is true even if it's been years before you came into the picture. They're still going to experience that amount of change and that finality in their parents not being together. And then for their other parent, you may be representing a life that they thought they were going to have as a full family unit. And again, that can be true even if everybody is coming from a very healed place and the two parents are co-parenting well together and you feel like, well, everything's resolved, this shouldn't be so hard. You still might be representing something that feels uncomfortable to them, so just give it time. And if your dynamic with any of those other family members feels strained, again, just remember, we're on the same team, and I don't need to take it personally, and it's not necessarily permanent. This could look very different in a year. The relationships can shift, and maybe they won't. Especially in high conflict type of situations, it's very possible that this is going to continue to be hard. And so you can accept that and also allow for the possibility for things to evolve. The fourth and final pillar I'd like to share is to protect your home. There is so much in a blended family that is outside your control, and especially in a high conflict situation, it can feel like you have no control at all. But you can set the tone in your own home, and you can protect the kids and make sure that that is a safe space for them. They should never be pulled into the adult conflict. And it's not always easy to accept, but this can be true even if you know that you are being sabotaged at another household. Even if you know that there are adults in this family who are not playing by these same rules and who are trying to pull the kids into the adult conflict, you can choose not to participate. You can remind them they're safe and they don't have to worry about what's going on with the grown-ups, that they can love everyone and they don't have to choose sides. And sometimes you can say those things, and other times it just is the way that you're showing up and treating them, and they will feel that. They will notice that they feel safe in your home and that they're never being asked any information about the other house, and it's never being weaponized, and that you're not competing. A notable exception would be if you are concerned for their safety or well-being and you need more information about what's going on at the other household. And in that case, that would be something for their parent to handle. So you as a step parent really shouldn't be inserting yourself into that kind of situation. If you have a concern, you can go to your spouse and then they can handle getting the information from the kids so that they can intervene if they need to. In general, protecting the peace in your home is going to mean being very neutral about whatever is happening at their other household. If they mention things that just seem a little different to you, not alarming, just different, you can say, oh yeah, we do things a little differently here. Here's what we do. You don't need to other the other person or say, well, our way is better, or maybe you can do that there, but not here. You never want it to come off in any kind of way like it's better than, it's just different. Kids may test the limits here a little bit or provoke a little bit of a response, and you just don't need to participate in that. Again, give the other parent grace because sometimes kids will say things that sound a little outrageous and sometimes they are outrageous, and you don't always know what they're saying about you to the other household either. So sometimes kids, not in a mean-spirited way, just kind of, again, they're testing their limits, they're testing their loyalties here, and sometimes they might say something to one parent about the other. You don't need to get in the weeds of that. Basically, don't take the bait, and over time they will learn that you are not somebody who's going to gossip about their other parent or talk negatively about what's happening at that other household. The way that you respond to some of those little tests, again, I don't think that they're doing it on purpose, but it will set the groundwork for how they interact with you regarding the other parent, and it may even have some impact on how they talk about you to the other parent. Kids are wired to attach to the adults for their safety, and so it's very natural for them to sort of test this out and try to appease the adults and figure out what goes well and who wants to hear what. And so again, you're teaching them when you don't engage in a negative way, you're teaching them that that is not a way to bond with you and that you have no interest in talking negatively about the other household. And again, I want to emphasize this can be true even when it's not happening the other direction. I know that doesn't feel as good. I know that it feels bad to know maybe you're being talked about in a negative way, but when you don't participate, you really are setting a tone in your own home. You're modeling for them that gossiping about others is not a way to build trust and intimacy, and that you can have a relationship with somebody that is independent of another relationship. It doesn't need to be in competition, and that is a valuable thing. As far as whatever is being said about you at another household that is outside of your control, just remember again those purple and green snakes from earlier in the video. If it's not true, it's not true, and you don't need to explain or defend yourself. Just keep showing up the way that you actually are, and over time it will become clear if those things that are being said about you just aren't true. And if you have a solid foundation with your stepkid and they start confiding in you, maybe about the other parent, you can validate their emotions and their experience without throwing that other person under the bus. Again, going back to earlier, I talked about seeing the other person as doing their best and having a hard time, not giving you a hard time. You can even use that language with the kid. You can say, it sounds like they're having a really hard time. How can I support you? What can I do for you? And then you're moving the focus away from talking about the other parent and moving it back into, how can I support you right now? The bottom line here is we can always do our best to protect the kids from the adult dynamics. We want to shield them from that as much as possible and never put them in the middle. So to recap, our 4 pillars for managing high conflict in a blended family are: pillar number 1, don't fuel the fire. Pillar number 2, set quiet boundaries. Pillar number 3, remember, you're on the same team. And pillar number 4, protect the peace in your own home. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more support. And I'm curious if any one of these pillars stood out to you as particularly helpful, or if you have another strategy that you've implemented in a high conflict situation that you'd like to share. If so, please share it below in the comments, and I'll see you next time.